How's everyone doing? I just want to get a quick show of hands before we start. How many people are actively developing on VR? Okay. And how many aren't developing but want to? Okay. Okay. Just turn this back on 1 second. Hopefully the PowerPoint will stay up.
There's
microphone. No mic?
Yeah.
Another technical. Hello? Not yet? Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So I know I just got a brief intro, but I just want to at least set the stage. So yes, I run Two Bear Studio, which is an internal studio at HTC. HTC approached me back in before the launch and said we want to build a studio from the ground up. We haven't done anything. Would you like to be a part of this journey of VR? And it was something I couldn't really turn down. So part of the studio is right here in Taipei. The other part is in San Francisco, and that's where I'm based. So that's where the Two Bears comes from. We have half the Formosan bear from Taipei, and then the other half's from the grizzly bear from California. So Two Bears. What that means, though, is we are part of Vive Studios, the Vive ecosystem. So you'll see there's Vive, that's the hardware. Vive Port is our marketplace. Vive Studios is our content generator, and Vivex is our accelerator. So we live in the Vive Studios content generator program, and we are focused on, as a Vive Studios company, building VR content on the following categories. So this isn't everything, but these are the top 10. We are focused, at Two Bears, focused on gaming. That's our mission, that was my background, and that's what we're set out to do at this point. So, more on my background. So I've primarily been working on traditional games from the PC, as these we have RTS up here with Company of Heroes, Dawn of War, some wrestling games, shooters, but most, and then I've also done some film. Some Adidas workouts with some of the top athletes, as well as SpongeBob SquarePants, some live action stuff, which was a fun experience. Before HTC, though, most recently I've been working with at Microsoft on the HoloLens. So I got the opportunity to take this beloved IP called Minecraft and this new technology called AR at the time, it wasn't even HoloLens, and put it together. How do we do that? So for a year, we spent trying to figure out how to put it on Minecraft on your wall, which is on you can see on the top right. You just you can play it anywhere, or make a tabletop version, reimagine it in a whole new way. So that's where I was at, and then until HTC pulled me over, and we started a studio, and we built Arcade Saga. So I wasn't just building one game in a year. We had the overambitious idea to say, hey, let's make 3 games in the first year of our first studio. So we made an archery game called Bowshot. The one in the center is called Smash, which is a first-person Pong or first-person air hockey. And then the one on the right was a Fracture. So think of it as a first-person breakout. So we took all those 3, and then we wrapped them all up together, and we called it Arcade Saga, and we launched it last December. And we're very happy with it. A lot of lessons learned from all of that together. So one of the questions I get asked all the time is working in VR different? The short answer is yes, it's absolutely different. But there's a lot that's the exact same. So it's a yes and no answer, and that's where I'm basing this talk on. The development cycle primarily is the same. This is how we manage the studio internally. We build a prototype, which is also known as, oh my God, best idea ever. I'm going to be rich. I've got this great idea. Nobody's ever thought of it before. And then you start figuring out the prototype. And then you get into the pre-production phase when you start thinking it through and you realize, wow, okay, this is a little bit harder than I thought. But you're still going to make it. And then you get to the point during production where it sucks. Like, this is just not working. And then you start going back to what other people did. And somehow you pull through, and then you say, okay, I'm going to make it. We're going to work on this, and we're going to go. After that, you move on to the testing phase. And then that's when you really are at your wit's end, just like ship it. You've been working on it so long, you want to get it out. And then finally, you ship. Super excited. You're done. You're almost as happy as that first idea when you get it. However, you realize there's more to be done. There's bugs, there's the community feedback, there's DLC, oh, and you have to localize it. So all this is the same. You get the same ups and downs. It's just a whole new medium. So that's where I base at it. One of the things that's also the same, but there's more of an emphasis in VR, is the action loop. So what this is, all really great games have a basic structure. There's the action. This is the moment-to-moment action of the player. Any user is doing. This is what they're doing from 1 second on to the next. The purpose aspect is, why do you care what you're doing? Like, why is that important? Why are you going to come back and do it? Legacy is the mastery of any event. So you start with the action, like, say it's a shooter or it's a melee combat. The purpose could be the story and what's pulling you back into. You need to save, the princess or whatever you want to wrap it in. The legacy is the mastery of that combat. How do you do it? How do you build on that? New abilities, and then you go back to the action. It feeds all in itself. In VR, our action mechanics, things that we've been building and working on over time have changed. So, like for example, just moving the character. A basic, you use the analog stick or you use WASD on a keyboard to move forward. We can't do that right now. We know that doesn't work in VR. Okay? So thinking things through. So this is where part of your production, part of your design, this is where you need to live, is in this action loop, because everything needs to be rethought of. So your abilities. What do you do? What abilities does the player have? The obstacle. Is it the boss? Is it the enemy characters? And then the setup. The setup is the situation. You come into a room, the door's locked, you're about to use your abilities to beat up the bad guys. You keep going back and forth into this loop. That's your action loop, and you have to focus on that. That's the main thing that's going to carry your product all the way through. Throughout the first year, we called it year zero, the very first, right after it launched. There was a lot of feedback that we've been getting from consumers that, the games they're great tech demos, people don't come back for more, there's not enough depth. Well, because it's year zero, and people were focused on action. This is what they're doing. They're trying to figure out how to actually work in this new medium. They didn't have time yet to create a purpose of why would you come back, let alone add enough depth to add mastery. So we're in year one now, and we're starting to see that. So more and more, you're going to start to see more purpose, more legacy in these games. So to me, it all makes sense. It's why the first time a new medium comes out, things are all stuck there, so we're all trying to figure it out. So it's just a good frame of reference to think when you're thinking about your design, you're thinking about things, the action loop. What is the moment to moment? And the solution is trial and error. It's just go try it. You fail, okay, try something else. It's not really a fail, it's just it's research and develop it. Chalk it up to that. And then, of course, the golden rule is start at 90 frames a second and stay there. If you put something in and it doesn't make it at 90 frames, then it doesn't go in. So, all right. Another lesson that we learned is determine your UI early. So there's really two mechanisms at this point. We have the pointer. You have your controller, and it's got a laser to your object. The other one's the collider, where you actually have to go up and press it. Our first product, Arcade Saga, we had to combine 3 separate teams, 3 games, put them into one, and we chose the pointer. It was great because it was easy. You can put a panel out in the depth. It's easy, and it was an action game. So we wanted people to, you pass the level, boom, you're on to the next one, quick. So it's fast. And that was the point for the pointer for us. We wanted to keep it going. Our new project, we had some of the legacy code from the pointer, but we also started to add the collider. Because as we found out through development, the more the player actually engages and touches an object, the more active they are, and the more that they take away from it. So we felt that the collider mechanism was actually better. We've all probably done it. If you've experienced VR, anytime you've touched a button or pulled open a door, those little mundane things feel amazing. It's the same thing for UI. You can have a button that turns something on or flips something. The flip side is the collider is hard. It takes a long time. If you start it, if you pick the collider, then you're going to be working on it throughout your whole project. The flip side is it's way engaging, and players are going to feel that, but it's just more work. So setting up, trying to figure out your studio, figuring out what kind of project, pick your UI early and stick with it. Be consistent and don't try to put sometimes pointer, sometimes collider. Just stick with it. A little note too on the collider is you have to think about height, player's height. How tall, I've got long arms, I can reach certain things. People are going to have to walk over if they're short or if they're kids. And maybe they don't have enough of the room scale. So you got to think things through about how. And that's why the collider, although beneficial to the player, definitely harder to pull off. So prototype planning. Since we don't know everything, we don't have set rules in VR, you have to prototype, trial and error. And then I get the question is, how do you know when you're done? How do you know when to stop prototyping and actually build it? So some tips for us is one is don't get bogged down in the documentation. I don't personally like documentation. I know that's sacrilegious to a lot of people in my industry, just because sometimes you spend so much time actually working on the documentation, the game's already evolved. It's always out of date. So you're fighting this battle. But what I do promote is creating done when statements. So a done when statement is saying when you're done from the player's point of view for any given goal. So here's an example that I've heard, that I get back. So done when. When a user can pick up a bottle with a controller by touching it. That's okay, but it's not enough. So this is where I have to constantly push back as the leader saying, no, we need a little bit more information. I don't need a full tech spec, but I need a little bit more information. So something that's a little bit better is this. So done when a user can pick up any bottle, not just a bottle, any bottle. So that just blows up the scope right there. So just by that one word. With any controller, so now you know both, and they can touch it and by pulling the trigger. So we're clarifying that. If the user drops it and releases it, it'll fall on the floor and shatter. And then also if the player throws it, it'll continue moving until it collides with another object. So it's only one extra sentence with a couple changes, but it opens up a lot of the depth of what this really means. That's it. You start this, everybody who's working on it understands it, knows the intent from the player's point of view. All the specs should be coming from what the player feels. Focus on the feeling of the player. How does the player feel at this moment? How does the player interact with it? It's not just touching it. You want him to pick it up, so you want him to pull it up. What if he drops it? Is it going to float there or is it going to fall? Like thinking through that whole thought process of what happens, the player's intent. So player's intent is the big takeaway there. So done when. We all know, we want to get from A to B. A, we don't have anything. B is when the done when's done. That's really the development cycle of how it works, right? Is just allowing it to go. From in my head, I know exactly where we need to go, right? Straight here. But an engineer may take us on this roller coaster because he interpreted it differently. I didn't say when you throw it, is it throwing in a parabolic angle? Is it going to go straight? Is it going to hit the ground and keep rolling? We don't know. Or that done when statement didn't go into that level of depth, and that's okay. Because on these moments of these peaks and valleys, we might find all those pieces of like aha moment that you didn't think about it. Or you might find another moment like that's great, but it's too far off of this path. So we're going to hold off on that and keep that later. But the bottom line is that this path, you're still going toward B. And we're still going toward that player's intent or toward that feeling. So I'm a big proponent of allowing players to explore, allowing engineers to explore as well. Figure it out. Get the intent of what you want, and then we'll figure it out. So another big lesson that we learned early on was to invest in tools. I want more tools, but it's a balance between writing tools versus actually writing code to promote the game, or to further the game. But one of the ones that we created early on was this one. It was the one that we allowed us to test our image quality and set a background range and a foreground range. So let me show you a quick little video here. So the red represents the distance in meters, and the blue represents the height. So this little tool, as simple as it is, was tremendously important to see where the fall off happens. You can take something like this, throw your own artistic, this was just a default model, but you can put your own style on it, whatever character you want. When does the graphic, break down? When does it get too blurry? We know that the lenses aren't, 8K in each eye yet, or one day they will be, but not yet. So there we go. So yeah, no technical issues, right? But that little tool helped us set, okay, this is where the image breaks down. This is where the character breaks down. So what that gave us was a set of boundaries. Our boss battles or our enemies are going to spawn at this point, and then we can build the levels from there on. That's what set us a foundation. And then we can build from there. So pick your style if you know it, find it, and then build from there. And it'll save you some time, definitely. Okay, next one, usability. So before I go into this, I want to take a quick little rant of how much everyone told me usability was amazing throughout my career of traditional games. And then they're expensive, they're time-consuming. But at the end of the day, they only really told me stuff that was already in my list to do. My game wasn't done. I give it to a bunch of people to test it and give us feedback. And they basically reinforce all the stuff that I know that I have to do. And it was only on a very rare occasion where maybe somebody approached something a little bit different or didn't know. I'm like, oh, okay, we could fix it. But the amount of time and effort we put into focus tests and usability studies, it really didn't give us back as much as we expected because we knew where we wanted to take the game. And we didn't have the luxury to make the game, get it finished, and then do studies to see if there's anything we should fix. So as soon as the game's ready, we were all in ship it mode and get it out. So that's where we are. But VR has changed that for me. Because it's not about what they're doing, it's about how they're doing it, how they're interacting with your content. So for example, you have a passive experience, you have an active experience. Right? This was also something, I worked on the Kinect for a while as well, and we wanted players to be active, not just passive. But from this scenario, from any traditional game, whether you are passive or active, you press the A button, you pull the trigger, you'll get the exact same feedback from the game. So if you're looking at telemetry or if you're looking at how long did it take someone to beat a level, they still did the exact same things to do it. In VR, it's very different. We want to know, are they engaged? Are they sitting up? If we see a player who is sitting down and is playing your games like, actually, I'm going to stand up and play this one, we know we've got them. We've hooked them. They're standing up. Or the other way around. Like, oh, I'm going to sit down and just watch the rest of this or whatever. We've lost them. We want them to stay engaged. That was a key thing. So understanding the feedback, understanding players, understanding the engagement level is huge. So, an action item. When you have a usability study, you always want to have your action items. First one is making sure people are not passive. They are active. So you look for those fall-off points of when are we losing people or when are we gaining them. And then understand the feedback. Who's testing your stuff? Last year, we did a bunch of tests. And virtually every piece of content got a 10 out of 10. Everybody loved it. Namely because it's their first time in VR. So everything was cool. So we couldn't do anything wrong. So it kind of invalidates some of the testing early because it's just like everything is cool in VR. Things are changing. People are playing a lot more. There's a lot more content out there and people are getting more sophisticated. So when you do your studies, know what they've played, what they haven't played, because that will skew your results. So here, focus on the demographic and know what they did. This is a plug for a group that in full disclosure, is a Vivex company. The Vivex is our accelerator program. One of the owners was in San Francisco with me, and he was telling me what he did, and I'm like, okay, let me learn more about it. And they do testing for VR, which is hard because the space requirements. To have a test studio and test facilities, you need a lot of places. Here, the testing is in players' homes. So you get to see a recording of someone in their home environment. So every setup is different. You see how they would normally react. They don't know you. We never get introduced, so it's not like I'm inviting them to my studio, giving them pizza and asking them to be honest and tell me how much they love my game. It's very disconnected, so they can see it. In this example here, we get to see someone play. In the top left, top left, you can see the GPU, the CPU, their spikes. You can see what they're doing in the game at that moment, how they're doing it, and to see the performance. So it's very good feedback to see. I'll give you one more little video here. I hope. Nope. Let's see. There you go.
That's kind of cool. Another achievement, by the way. Final score was 2280.
Fantastic. That's...
Okay, so question there. How enjoyable was this level 1 to 10? Well, 7. Challenging, I'd say a 5. I think this level was clear. I haven't played a previous level, so I'm going to skip that much. Interesting, okay. Yes. Oh, in a China shop. So broke all on that one, so that's cool. So it is possible to break them. So see, because I had more success.
So with this example, what I wanted to basically show was two things. One is, outside of his fashion choice, which is amazing, he's in his home, he's just talking, he has an inner monologue that he's communicating to me as I'm watching. I can see how he's participating in his thought process. It's very interesting for me because he's isolated. Nobody else is around. And then if you notice too, we added a questionnaire. So that was something we did because as we had like 40 levels in that game. And getting feedback from someone after they played for an hour or two, it's like, how was the first few levels? It's hard to remember. So there, instantly, as soon as they play, how did I like this one? Yes. Was it harder than the last one? Yes or no. And then you can see your difficulty ramp from their point of view, and you get to actually watch them play. And then watch how they struggle, or watch how they succeeded. So it's not what they're doing, it's how they're doing it. How engaged are they? Are they actively moving around, or are they just standing there? So, and then, you know, it's up for you to make those decisions to like, oh, we want them to make a move. So how do you do that? You know, so usability study for us has been very important. There's also some other additional feedback that they provide. If you sign up, you get feedback from their individual responses, their takeaways, how they would rate it on Steam or Viveport or any other thing if they downloaded it right there. So that's good feedback from you. If they were going to, this is your audience. You go there, hey, if I played this today, I would rate it a 7. Okay, or thumbs up, thumbs down. That's good. It's good information for you. So when you go to the market, you already have a heads up of kind of like, okay, I think I know where we're going to be. Or you take this in another month, you do another round, and you see if you're increasing your score. So also there's sections on like with frustrated players, and technical issues. So you can go. They offer a lot more, but this has been very beneficial to us. So highly recommend it for any type of VR to get new, different people to actually explore your content. All right. One of the other lessons that we learned was designing for the environment. We made an arcade game because we wanted to show off room scale and action and 360 gaming because it was the only VR headset on the planet that could do that. We were Vive Studios, and we wanted to do that. So that's what we did. And this new initiative of VR arcades started to happen. Well, we're an arcade game. Easy enough. Move it in there, put it in there, and we can support it. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. We didn't design for the arcade experience. We designed for a home arcade experience, totally different. Namely, the home, you're by yourself. When you come to an arcade, you usually have different people with you. Maybe more of a hop-in, hop-out experience. So how you set up your profile, save your data, that kind of thing we didn't prepare for. Our tutorials, we heard initially, were way too long. Our home experience, we expected you to own it and you were going to play there for hours, so we wanted to teach you everything. The average session of an arcade is about 6 minutes. So it's like, okay, what do we have to teach them for 6 minutes of gameplay? So we had to scale our tutorials way back. Once we started to do those things, we saw longer engagement in our games at the arcades. So designing it, are you designing it for work? Are they sitting? Are they, is it an event like an IMAX or things like that? Where are people doing it? Understand that. So taking your content and just porting it straight over, it's not necessarily the best case scenario for VR. You need to know where they're experiencing this and then design around that. Make those small little tweaks. So making your voice heard. This was one slide I wasn't 100% sure if we were going to really talk about because there's no real answer. We launched on December 8th of last year, and a week later on Steam, there was 59 other titles that came out in between that week. So we were no longer what's new. We were so old, we were a week into our launch, and we were already like 3 pages deep on Steam of, hey, here's what's new. We had the first 2 days of constant interviews from TechCrunch and Upload VR and all these places. But a week later, we were going to announce like, oh, we got multiplayer coming. But they're like, oh, that was old. There's so many other games. They're getting inundated. Imagine that from a press point of view. Every day, there's 7 new titles coming out. So be aware of it. It's a scary thought, but making your voice heard is something that you need to do. When your game's ready, you have to promote yourself. Be on social media. Get out there, start with the community, and build it. This is the only way that we've seen for people to be able to break through. But once you start, you can't stop. You can't say, announce, make a couple tweets, go on Facebook, and then go silent for 3 months. You have to stay actively engaged, talking about, if there's other shows. Hey, I'm at this show. This is what I've learned. Keep people aware of your product and get it in the vernacular. People talking. You have to build your own community. Quiver VR was a good example. It's a little bow and arrow tower defense game. Started off terrible graphics, just one guy doing. He updated, he talked to the community, he sent his updates, he was honest with them, this is where they're at, and he slowly built his own little community of this game. And from when it first launched, when I first played it, to where it's at now, it's far better. But his community followed him because he was honest with them and said where they're at. So that's what I mean when I say be honest. Tell them, hey, we're early. Give us your feedback. Engage with them. You have to be passionate about your own product. You can't be passive. This is like the one takeaway from this point is if you aren't passionate about your own product, how do you expect a community member, some random guy on Steam, going to be passionate for you to retweet or tell his friends? They have to see how much you love your own product and why it's so good. So tell them, this is what we're doing that nobody else is, and this is why it's awesome. So it's a busy marketplace, but that just shows that, hey, everything's working, everyone's going, there's a lot of excitement. So, make your own voice heard and be your best spokesperson. Building for the best arcade experience. This is really our way of saying build for 6 degrees of freedom, room scale. Build for motion controllers. Start there and then port down. We started there, namely because we were Vive. But what that did was allow us to port everywhere. We're on Oculus. It was easy. Once we made our Vive, we did it. If we want to go to the arcade, it was easy. They have, there's so many VR companies that have different controllers, different hand, different, haptic suits. We're looking into mobile. There's a whole new there's new ways to experience our content, but we started with the 6DOF, and it was easy to port down. So if you start with the gear or some 3DOF, it's going to be harder. So our recommendation is start there and then port everywhere. Port to every platform possible. So we want developers, Vive Studios, we don't hold it only for Vive. We say go everywhere. We want everyone to make money. We're at a part in the industry where they don't need to lose for us to win. So it's a win for everybody. So definitely do that. And then a little pro tip here. Connect your phone to your Vive. I talk to a lot of people, they don't even know that's a feature. Bluetooth to your phone. What this is, you can do yourself a favor and you may not punch somebody trying to come to grab you when you're in VR. It's a helpful tip, and it's a big benefit. And then my final thought, I just want to, before I open up to questions, is games or other companies like, say, Rovio, Angry Birds, probably all heard of it, Supercell, they've all come out with games that failed before. Rovio, I think, said they had 51 games that failed before they got to Angry Birds over a 6-year period. If I ask any one of you who's up to fail 51 times before they actually have some sort of success, most of you guys probably wouldn't even start. I know I wouldn't. Sounds very intimidating. Supercell, which is one of the most, $2.4 million a day, I think they're making on in their games. It's pretty insane. But I can probably ramble, all their other games that nobody even heard of before. So it'll take time. If you get a VR game, you get some sort of content out there and it doesn't do well, chalk it up to research and development. You learned a ton, move on and bring that on to the next one. So, it's a thriving community right now. VR is open. The community is very open to sharing. And the tools are great right now. And that's why we're seeing a lot of content, because things are getting easier. So, just keep your chin up and, be your best spokesperson. All right? So, thank you.
OK， 现场有人有问题吗？那如果各位有问题的话，可以用中文问，然后我试着用我可以理解的英文解释给他听。OK。
Hi, my name is Paul, and I'm the UX designer. So I want to ask you that, can you elaborate more on your UX design process, especially for user testing?
Are you talking about the design process on how to set up a user test?
Yes, usability.
The usability. So what I would do is I reach out to Fishbowl and say, this is what I want. I want half female, half male, and then give me people who have already played this game or played who like puzzle games. And then I set the framework. Say, this is what I want for this test. And then he'll go out and get them. And they do their test, and then we get it, and it's super efficient. I give them the Steam codes or Viveport codes on Friday. By Monday, by the time I get them in, I have all the videos there downloaded, and I can just see it.
So you have a facility to do that?
They do it. That's the beauty of it. They go outsource to people's homes. They have contracts with hundreds of people. Well, they'll pay them if they do it, and then they'll make their video and then upload it.
So who is this they you're talking about?
So Fishbowl VR. Okay. So yeah, that's the company. And we can talk after, and I can give you some more of their information. So.
Is that an expensive test?
Is it? She was asking, is that an expensive test? From my history, so I used to run a test group at THQ. I believe they're actually very reasonable for the amount of feedback, the timing, which is very critical. You wait 2 weeks to get a test back, your build's already changed so far. But if I can get it on Friday, get it back that Monday, very prompt. So I don't have the rates right in front of me, or at least off the top of my head, but I can get you those rates for sure.
So you mentioned that you need to test for the demographics. So for example, if we're going to launch a title for the Asian market, does it mean that we need to specify the audience in the test group?
I think, yeah, it helps. I mean, if you don't, then they'll just get random people. But if you know you're targeting a, say, an Asian demographic that's say 15 and under, then he'll get that for you. If you just get anyone random, it might not be as apt. The feedback's still feedback, but it's not as apt to what you're trying to accomplish in your goals. So there was someone that came out and they were making, they were trying to determine whether they're making a military simulator game or they're making a hardcore game, and there's that arcade aspect. So they got people who were military fans of military shooters. That's what they went, all their feedback was dedicated to them. So.
And all of those testers, they have their own Vive setup.
Yep. Their own Vive setups, they have different, and you'll get their list of graphics cards or computers of what they're running, and then they all have different setups, their home setups, their real home setups. And I think that's valuable too, to see how big and how people are actually using the space.
So that comes with analytics data for you to do some analysis later on.
Well, analytics are different because that's where you put your own analytics in, and then if it goes back up to a cloud server, and then you can read it. So this is isolated. The analytics are more for like mass, a trend. You're seeing everyone fall off at a certain point, or something else like that. So the analytics, would be something that the programmers do to answer your own questions, while the other ones are more specific.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is David. I'm assuming that after Arcade Saga, you are developing other games. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about the lessons learned from Arcade Saga, and then how you either brought it to the new game, or how you decide what to do in the new game?
So I kind of missed what half you said. You said, or at least just repeat the first part of the question.
Well, I guess no. What lessons have you learned from Arcade Saga, and then how does that affect how you move on to the next project?
So yeah, we've got 2 projects that were in the works right now. Very different than Arcade Saga in a totally different way. What we learned was fatigue. How people, there's a threshold, I would say. People are excited, they're engaged, and then they're like, oh, I'm starting to sweat, I'm gonna stop. And I'm like, yo, you haven't even begun. Like, you're only on like level 3. So that pacing of when they're ready, or then there's the hardcore that'll just go, nuts, and they'll be sweating, eyes are, burning. So understanding the fatigue of what an action game is, that was something for us. So understand that pacing, of how we're doing it, ramping. Another one was 360 gaming. Because we have the ability to do 360, that was something that we're going to take advantage of it. It's not as, to design around that wasn't as engaging as we found originally, at least with those prototypes and those games that we had. So having people constantly turn around, we had to do other things to think about, like the cord. Are people stepping over the cord, that kind of cord awareness, making sure people feel safe. The more they turned around, the more that they lost where they were in their own chaperone. So then we had to kind of re-show them to get back to the center. So although we do have 360 aspects of our game, especially our archery game, where they're coming at you from all different directions, that was something that we actually pulled back a lot on those levels than what we did. It's getting something from more of that sweeps was still something that was actually more engaging. So that was something. As far as carrying on to the next ones, the pacing, the UI, those are all big lessons, which I kind of touched on, of like, what's the pace of your game? If it's a fast-paced game, you want to keep going, then the point and click was easy, then we'll do it. We wanted to slow up in our next game. Very slow, methodical, so we're going to go to more of a collider. Everything's touch, where it's forcing the player to go and touch something. We're pulling back, so, yeah.
OK， 还有人有问题吗？那 OK， 我看一下 OK 啊，现在还有点时间 ，so I have a question about it.
Sure.
Yeah, because HTC I guess is the hardware company. Sorry, not hardware company. It's HTC is related about hardware. So I want to ask a question related to hardware. It means, what do you think the limitation about VR, especially, for example, we can make the VR device wireless, or we can cancel the checkpoint. It means we don't use any checkpoint. So after all, what can we do to encourage people to use VR? Because I guess maybe the big problem is about content, all of the content issue. So if we can make the game so interesting, how can we play VR games longer? Because usually people will probably with DC, 3D DC, you can use it in VR. Or we don't want to use in the controller because the controller is too tight when we move our arm or something. So probably we can thinking about a new controller, or we can use in the VR device. So how do you think? Thank you.
So there's a number of things there. One, the hardware's changing, right? We know that. We know graphics are going to get better. We know things. We know wireless is coming. As content developers, we can't assume everyone's going to have wireless. We can't assume like eye tracking. There's eye tracking things which are awesome, but as a developer, we can't assume everyone's going to. So we got to support both if we want to support that. So you just have to be cautious when developing, making sure you're developing for the widest audience possible. And then if you see an aspect of a hardware like addition that's going to enhance your product naturally. Like I don't know if people have seen the new some of the new controllers where it's in the middle of your hand, you can use your fingers. Like if that works for your product, then I would say yeah, go ahead and try this, but don't force it because not everyone's going to have that, right? If you don't use your fingers or hands grabbing in your game, then that might not be worth it. As far as getting people to stay longer, I think it really comes down to the content. It's, you know, you're talking about fatigue. I think we saw it even back the Wii, the original Wii. People were swinging, and then they started to, you know, do half gestures. The Kinect was the same thing. We had, you know, people we were trying to get them to stay, but it all fell, you know, it ultimately falls down on the content. If the content's engaging, people are going to do it for hours. And people are going to build up a tolerance for it if they're not ready already. So I think we're still so early. You know, we're a year into it. You know, and they just announced Elder Scrolls, which is amazing. You know, Doom and Fallout. Those are some big games that are going to play some long hours. So I think it'll get there.
Thank you. 好，如果各位没有问题的话，那我们今天可能就是为鼓励大家去14楼参观一下，所以我们就先到此结束。那我们先谢谢 David 这么精彩的 presentation。Thank you, thank you. Yeah, thank you, David.